right, let's get back now to one of today's biggest stories. Ed Whitacre stepping down as CEO of General Motors. Back with us is Bloomberg News' Jeff Green, who broke the story this morning. Also with us, Jessica Caldwell, senior analyst at Edmunds.com, an online automotive database. Let's talk about, first of all, Jeff, I think one of the more interesting things is the surprise aspect of this, because GM is playing it off like this was the plan all along and everybody knew it. But clearly, Ed Whitacre had put a stamp of permanence, at least more than the short tenure that he's been there on this company. What's the story as far as breaking news?
Well, the question seems to come down to what the long run means. And to do an IPO, the long run needs to be 2 more years. And there's a sense that maybe that's just too much for Ed Whitacre. He had said, I'll do this well until I need to, not one day longer. And here we are looking at an IPO where they're going to want to hear, the investors are going to want to hear, this is the guy for a while, not this is the guy for a week. They want to know who's running the company.
Well, Jessica, what was your take on all of the news? So much from General Motors, but most specifically the news on Whitacre.
Yeah, it was definitely a big surprise. I think we all thought that the big news this week, perhaps Friday or next week, would be the IPO. And then Whitacre steps down. Of course, the replacement, everyone thought for a long time it was looking like Chris Liddell, the new CFO. So I think everything was definitely a surprise, but clearly it's going towards getting everything right. This is our leadership. We're going to move forward and go ahead with the IPO.
What do you think about Akerson?
Don't know a lot about him yet. I mean, he's been there since bankruptcy times, so I know that he's had a lot to do within the company, a lot of the changes that have gone forward. So, I'm thinking that he was there, right from the start of trying to rebirth this brand. So I think he's, going to be as good as any to lead them forward.
And I know, Jeff, you said earlier he's not really a new guy. He's been there for about a year. So you think investors, the analyst community, are going to be pretty comfortable with him at the helm of GM?
Well, he's definitely a known quantity in the private equity world. He worked at Carlyle. He's been with several funds. He's also really well known in the telecom world, the same sort of world as Ed Whitacre. Where he's not really well known, based on everything I've been learning today, is within General Motors' general ranks of employees. This is not a guy who's done a lot of speaking. We're not sure, but this may have been the first time we've heard him speak on behalf of General Motors since he's been there. He's not been a public face of General Motors. He's not been a public guy. So that'll be the change, to see how he kind of comes out and becomes the face of General Motors. That's something that even Ed Whitacre was uncomfortable with and would admit to. Why do you guys want to write stories about us all the time? It was never something that Ed Whitacre was comfortable with, and this guy comes across as somebody who's much more private than Ed Whitacre had been.
Jessica, what do you think about the role of the government in this whole story? I mean, what I think we could safely call the sudden departure of Ed Whitacre. I mean, he's out as CEO in a couple weeks, out as chairman at the end of the year, and then the IPO, where Steve Ratner actually says, hey, this is not ideal, we would prefer to wait. And the government's a 61% shareholder, right? So if they want to wait, you'd think they would wait.
I think the big criticism is that, GM has had a few quarters of good profit, but still, it's only been a year since they came out of bankruptcy. So there's a lot still to be said. And people like to see stability and they like to see continued growth. So I think that's kind of, where everyone's, wondering what's the rush. But, of course, there's lots of different interests. But, ideally, it would be more interesting to see, longer term growth and more stability within GM.
Jeff, you know what I'm getting at here. I mean, if Treasury owns 61% of the company, don't they ultimately call the shots?
The sense is that there is, if you were, we talked about this before, if this were a perfect world, you would wait for this IPO. There's a political aspect to this that, as much as they'd like to get their money back, they'd also like to stop having people refer to the takeover of General Motors, government motors, the whole aspect of socialism in America. They'd like to have that behind them, so that it's sort of goes both ways. If you wait to do the IPO, that's just one more year of having everybody criticize them. And there is a sense that, looking at what they want to sell in the IPO, they want to get below 49% or below 50%. That's symbolic, and that's what a lot of this is about.
But even with the IPO, guys, I mean, you, me, and everybody else, we're still going to have a significant holding of General Motors, right, Jessica?
Right, and I don't think anyone's going to really forget the whole government motors just because this goes forward. I mean, I think that's just going to be a stamp on the record until, people move on to the next story. I mean, I don't think it's anything going away, whether or not, whatever happens. I think people are going to continue to know it. And, even if it doesn't necessarily reflect sales or is going to affect sales, people will buy it if they like the product. But I don't think the name is something that's going to go away just because of this IPO.
And Jeff, I mean, ultimately it's going to be about about the product. Obviously, General Motors, with this whole reorganization and so on, the bankruptcy, I mean, they've been paring down their brands. We get that. I mean, will the brand still be a strong one 5 years from now? What are you hearing from industry folks?
Well, we wrote some stuff just recently. There's a lot of emphasis on trying to plug the gaps, come look at products they may need to fill in any spaces they're not in. Their biggest weakness right now is their pickups and large SUVs. They're behind Ford in that area. They don't have new products coming out soon. Their cars, their smaller SUVs, a lot of that stuff they're well received. Those look good. There's not a lot of complaints about the GM products that have come to market in recent years, so they seem to have the product stuff fixed. It's just a matter of getting the products out that were delayed by bankruptcy.
Jessica, what about their product offering in Europe? I mean, they can't obviously sell the trucks over there. They don't drive trucks over there. The Camaro even is too big and heavy to sell at a reasonable price in Europe. And if they come out with the Cruise in Europe, I had a viewer from Germany write in earlier, you know, there's a lot of European competition when you're talking about small, compact, fuel-efficient cars. You just can't really break into that market.
Well, GM is already...
I mean, the Europeans have been doing small, fuel-efficient cars for a long period of time. So GM, it's not really their core competency, you know, here or anywhere, really. So, I mean, they're competing with a market that's already matured. So, you know, that's something they're going to have to keep on working on, but it's not going to be met with initial success.
Jeff, sounds like you want to chime in here, too.
Yeah. The thing everybody forgets is General Motors has this secret weapon in Korea called GM Daewoo. They've been building really successful small cars out of Korea and sending them to the rest of the world very successfully. They do small cars for the rest of the world, and they have Opel in Europe. It's not like they've been there. They're not new to Europe with the Cruise. It's just that the cost structure is out of whack in Europe. They do have products. They could probably do it with Chevy. They probably don't even need Opel.
Jeff, is this why investment managers in Seoul can't wait to get their hands on GM shares?
Well, it remains to be seen if that's true. Based on where the bonds are trading, this is a $100 a share company, but that's just bonds and that's just math. We don't know yet what the actual investors are going to be willing to put down.
Hey, guys, got 20 seconds left here. Jessica, you first. I mean, is there a chance, though, that the IPO could be delayed significantly? Got 5 seconds for you.
Doesn't sound like it. I mean, every indication looks like it's going to go ahead with schedule, especially with the announcement of Whitacre stepping down today.
Jeff, and from everything you're hearing on your channels, and I know they're good ones,
Most of what we heard was maybe slip into next week early, but nothing months from now or anything like that.
All right, got it. All right, we're going to run. Hey, guys, thank you so much. Jeff Green and Jessica Caldwell joining us to talk about General Motors.
All right.